Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week. And this week I had, I think, about 14 books? Yes, 14 books. So let's get started. Least favorite to best pick of the week. So my least favorite book this week was, sadly, Flash Forward issue 1. Now, I will say I wasn't a huge Heroes in Crisis fan, but after reading Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn, I'm like, okay, maybe these sequel series will be better and utilize the information from Heroes in Crisis and propel a more interesting story. And I really enjoyed that series, but Flash Forward, on the other hand, I didn't quite like, especially those first, 6 pages. That's pretty much exposition about the multiverses. I'm like, all right, let's get to Wally. And then when we do get to Wally, it's more wallowing. And that's one thing I really did not like about Heroes in Crisis, is that it was Wally saying, woe is me, And I understand that it's trying to delve into the psychological aspect of Wally. But I just don't really love the execution of it. There's no route where I feel like Wally's trying to be a better person or dealing with his emotions. And I think that's been the thing I haven't been liking about his arc so far. And then what's thrusted upon us with this story is that, all right, now we're dealing with multiverses. And I feel like there's 2 different stories being told here, and they just do not gel together. So I do like the idea of Wally being connected to the multiverse, and I'm hoping we get a better issue 2, issue 3, issues to come. Because I think there's some potential with this plot line, but they just need to figure out what they want to do with Wally as a character. And I think that's the biggest hurdle here. And I guess he's trying to have this redemption arc, but it just didn't feel like that in this issue. So I'll pick up the next issue, see where it goes. Because I do want to see where this multiverse stuff goes. And I think that makes sense with his entrance to DC Rebirth and what the Flash's powers mean. But I just wasn't feeling this one. Also, I'm not a huge Brett Booth fan, so I didn't really like the artwork as well. I thought his hair was really exaggerated, and not a huge fan of his art. So I'm going to give this 2 stars, and that is number 14, and moving on to number 13. Number 13 for me is Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man issue 12. This is actually one of my more anticipated issues for this week because of the description. You're like, all right, Peter's dead, Spider-Man's dead, how's this gonna work out? And obviously you knew it was going to be a cop-out because Peter's not going to die, and if he is going to die, it's not going to be in a secondary series. It's going to happen in Amazing Spider-Man. So I was curious to see how they were going to get out of it, and honestly, one of my biggest things I don't like about this series, and a reason I might drop this soon, is I feel like the series is very much too much entailed to the friendly neighborhood aspect. Everything kind of feels like a filler arc, and that's what happens here. It's like, all right, this is kind of an interesting story of, all right, Peter might be dead, or people think he's dead. How are they going to deal with that? But the actual arc is just, again, very fillerish to me, where, this guy he has to go up against is hurting people around him, so he has to pretend to be dead, and then he teams up with the Fantastic Four by the end. I just wanted it to be a little bit more exciting. So overall, I'm going to give Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man issue 12 2.5 stars, and that is number 13. Artwork was really sleek, though. I did enjoy the art overall, but I don't know how long I'm going to be hanging on to this series. So far, the issues I've liked have been kind of few and far between for the title. Alright, moving on to number 12. I have a lot to say about this issue, and that is Spider-Man issue 1. So I think I'm going to do a whole video on the whole entire woman in refrigerators Mary Jane thing going on. But my overall review is that I was interested in seeing where this was going to go because, all we really did know about it is that Mary Jane and Peter were going to be involved. We didn't really know much about the series. And you do have an outsider from comics coming into the fold. You have J.J. Abrams writing a comic, which obviously he's a huge name. But then you also have his son. So how's that going to, be balanced? He's a newer writer. So again, how's that going to work with this series? And one thing I liked is how cinematic it was. I enjoyed the visuals the most, and how those visuals were paced in this book. And obviously you could really tell that goes for Abrams' script and the way he was able to translate that with the artist. Now, the thing I didn't like is that I think as a comic fan, especially as a Spider-Man fan, you could kind of tell some of this has happened before. And again, I don't know the J.J. Abrams and his son's knowledge on Spider-Man, but how many comics did he read to prepare for this book? And that's kind of the fear, because a lot of the storylines, shouldn't happen again. I think comics have moved past it, which is the Mary Jane thing. Spider-Man is always about guilt, and someone always dies, and, I thought we learned from the Gwen Stacy thing, and now having Mary Jane die, and that propelling this new character story did not work for me, and made me not like this new character, because I'm like, I want him to be a hero on his own, not have his mom die, and that's the reason why we get his story. So, again, gonna try to save that for my topic video, either Thursday or Friday I'm going to post. But another thing is having Peter have a son. We've dealt with this before. We literally just had Annie. Mayday Parker has been around for how many years? So it doesn't really feel fresh to me that Peter has a son. And it feels weird to me that Peter's so distant to his son. So I guess that's the idea that I'm curious to see why he's so distant and how that relationship will mesh, and how Peter has been dealing with MJ's death, but it just doesn't feel like a right story to me. Again, I think as a comic fan, it just doesn't fit the modern storytelling of Spider-Man. We've done this before, we've made these mistakes, and it just kind of feels repetitive and stale to me. So I obviously will pick up the rest to see where this goes as a Spider-Man fan. I don't think it was a horrible issue, but this is kind of the falters that happen when, you have a different type of creator coming on to a comic. And yeah, I was a little disappointed with this one. I'm hoping that maybe they're just presenting tropes here and they're going to be like, tricked ya, we're going to actually do this and play with these tropes. So we'll see what ends up happening. You do have a little bit of a tease. Who is this woman in this tube? Is it MJ? It possibly can be. So maybe something will happen there, and that piques my interest. And then also you have, obviously the obvious that Peter's son might become Spider-Man or learn he's Spider-Man, but these are pretty much the beats that happen in Spider-Girl. So artwork is really good though. Like I said, I enjoyed the artwork here. So overall I'm going to give Spider-Man issue 1 2.5 stars. Again, it was a harder issue to rate because it's not a bad issue, but some of the story choices I wasn't a fan of. Alright, moving on to number 11, which is Batman issue 79. And this issue, as you guess, is another Batman Catwoman issue. And doesn't quite progress the story that much. It's mostly about the boat, guys. It's about the street and boat. But I think we're finally at the end of the boat and the street. Because they finally agree. They're like, okay, the reason we keep mentioning this is that we're transformed into different people because we know each other. And now that they've kind of gone over this hurdle of everything that's happened, they've met on the beach. They rekindled their relationship because of the beach. So yes, I enjoyed the poeticness of it all. But because every issue, especially the issues that are mentioned with Catwoman and Batman, have to do with this beach, about this boat and street, once we actually got to the high end of that story, I'm like, I don't care anymore. So I think it got a little bit too repetitive for me. But overall, I hope this is a better direction for Batman. I'm still not completely feeling it. I do think it's very decompressed and not much happens in this issue. But the artwork's really good, and we'll see what Tom King's endgame will be in these next couple issues with City of Bane. And finally, Batman and Catwoman want to deal with Gotham. They dealt with their emotional stuff, and they're like, all right, let's go to Gotham. But they have been ignoring Gotham since. So, yeah, like I said, I'm going to give this 2.5 stars, and that is number, what are we even up to? That was number 11. Moving on to number 10, a bit higher than usual, and that is House of X issue 5. Once again, not one of my favorite series. I know a lot of people love it. It's just not really my thing. But I enjoyed this issue a bit more because I like the overall themes of rebirth, we'll say. We're seeing that the mutants are like, all right, I don't care about humans anymore. Let's care about ourselves. Even if we're enemies, let's be together. And that's pretty much the story of I like utilizing different X-Men things that we've seen before, nostalgicness to present this new story. Like when Cyclops or whoever's in the mask says, to me, my X-Men. I enjoyed that, and it had a different meaning to it. So artwork is pretty solid overall. Again, not my favorite series, but I definitely like that it's rejuvenating X-Men. X-Men and that people have been really enjoying this series. And I thought this is one of the better issues. So overall, I'm going to give this 3 stars, and that is number 10. Moving on to number 9, which is another series that I personally can't get into, but definitely see why people like it, and that is Absolute Carnage issue 3. Now, for me, I have not read Venom. I've read the first issue of it. I'm like, cool, I could definitely appreciate the artwork, appreciate the story, but it's not my thing. And same thing for Absolute Carnage. Artwork, drop dead gorgeous. And the reason I'm continuing this is because it does tie into Spider-Man, and obviously I'm reading Spider-Man. So I'm trying to read all this. And there's some good emotional beats with Venom and his son in this one. There's a good twist in the middle of it. And the cliffhanger, though, I feel like everything is just like, all right, someone's got the Venom suit. I get it. So the ending is that Hulk gets the Venom or Carnage suit. I think it was Carnage suit. He gets a symbiote in the end. Or maybe it was the mix of both. But yeah, he becomes a symbiote by the end, which, you know, what timeline is this? Is he Immortal Hulk at this point? So it does feel weird in the continuity of Marvel that this is happening. So that's one downside. But overall, it's a fun book, but it's a little lengthy for me. And there's some things I personally can feel attached to, like Eddie and his son. And because I didn't read Venom, I think you would get so much more if you read that series. You would understand their relationship a bit more and get the emotional strings here. And that's kind of what sucks, that this is a separate event. I kind of wish this was just in the Venom series or the main story in Venom, because I think it would make a lot more sense. But sales-wise, it's doing really well outside of Venom, so maybe Marvel, again, sales-wise, that made sense for them. And again, artwork, man, drop dead gorgeous. The coloring especially, I just love the reds and the blacks. It's so good. So that's just one reason to pick Absolute Carnage up. But yeah, gonna give that 3 stars, and that is number 9. Moving on to number 8, which is another new series, and that is Archie 55, issue 1. Now, I loved Mark Waid's version of Archie. I never really read Archie before Mark Waid, and then, again, fell in love with these characters. And I read the 1940s version, wasn't a huge fan, and I wanted to give the 1955s version a shot, and it's kind of a middle ground book for me. I love the idea of music here. I like, obviously the 50s is very important for transforming music, and I like that Archie is that, member that they use to showcase how music has changed and his passion for music, and it makes sense for Archie's character. But my biggest problems with this, 1940s book, 1955 book, I don't feel like anything different's being told. It doesn't really feel like it's being told in the lens of 2019. And that's been my biggest issue here, because Archie, Mark Waid's original Archie series was so modern and felt so now. And I kind of want that for the rest of these series if Mark Waid's writing it. But overall, if you're a music fan, I think you'll enjoy it. I'm debating to pick up issue 2 or not, just because, again, I didn't really love the 1940s series, and I don't know if there's anything that really hooked me for this one. But it also wasn't a bad issue either. It's just there for me. So overall, I'm going to give that 3 stars, and that is number 8. Moving on to number 7, I am going to take a sip of water, and then we'll talk about number 7. So number 7 for me is a book I have not picked up in a very long time, but I like this character, and that is Star Wars Age of Resistance Rey issue 1. So, like I said, have not picked up a Star Wars book in years, probably since like issue 20s or before that for the regular Star Wars series. It's been about 2 years or so. And I'm not a hardcore Star Wars fan. I like the franchise, but, I don't have to read every issue of it. But I like the new stuff. I like Rey as a character a lot. And here it's a nice middle, tie-in type story. If you like the movies, you get a little bit more in-depth with Leia and Rey's relationship, their friendship, and guidance, I would say. And then we get to see how Rey deals with, learning more about the Force and also taking some of Leia's opinions and advice really well, and I like how she deals with Han's death as well in this story. So overall, it's a fun issue. I don't think it's a totally necessary one, again, coming from someone who hasn't been reading Star Wars, but if you like the movies, you like the character, I thought it was a fun issue. I always like this creative team as well. Love Tom Taylor, and I love Rosanna's artwork, so it's nice to have them there. So that's something I enjoyed too. So I'm going to give that 3.5 stars, and that is number 7, I believe. Moving on to number 6, which is The Black Ghost, issue 1. So this is a Comixology exclusive book, original book, and I don't think I've read any of the Comixology stuff, but I saw this a lot on Twitter. I do like Alex as a writer. He, obviously does a lot for Archie. He is the president of it. So I want to check this out. I know he does a lot of good mystery books, a lot of novels. So again, want to see what this one was about. And overall, I thought it was a really promising issue. We get to see this reporter who's also a night teacher for GED students, and she's also like a reporter who's on the cop beat, so she writes about cops, and she's obsessed with this kind of pulp hero that is like a Robin Hood, James Bond type, and at the end of the issue, they cross paths and he gets shot in the head. So she's like, I'm sitting on the biggest story ever. What the hell do I do? Because she also has these instincts of fighting back and kind of has her own vigilantism in her as well. So you're curious if she can like pick up the mantle or something. So definitely a nice, unique twist on classic superheroes. Again, very pulpy because of the type of hero he is. But then you get like a Jessica Jones feel with our main characters. So I don't know if it was the perfect first issue. Again, I think some of the pacing was a little off for me. It took a while for me to get into it. I think I started really getting invested with that last page, and I kind of wish that last page was like the first page, and then you're like, oh my god, where do you go? So I kind of, we'll see how issue 2 will go, but maybe issue 2 would have been a better premiere. We'll see. But I like the idea of it a lot, and again, I think this title has a lot of potential, and artwork was really solid as well, and not too gritty, where I feel like what these noir stories can get into. So I liked it. Honestly, it kind of reminded me of We Can Never Go Home, that type of art style. When I saw it, it was maybe a little bit of a cartoonier version, but the coloring especially reminded me of that, if you remember that Black Mass series. Still love that series. But yeah, giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 6. Moving on to number 5, which is 5 Years, issue 4, which for some reason, like, Diamond-wise, like, always they post it a week before, and it gets a little confusing of when it's actually coming out, but I got this digitally, because I forgot this came out physically, so I got it on Comixology. But yeah, 5 Years, I love this book. It's a little bit of a slower issue, but it's a necessary issue where Kachu says goodbye to Francine, and Francine's like, all right, I understand you have to go, but I don't want this to happen ever again. And that's pretty much the story. Also, there's a bit of a background of the pressures of the bomb coming together, definitely happening, and it's not a bomb, it's the last bomb. So that was cool. Artwork is always good. I love the emotions for this book, and I think it's really spot on with this issue especially. So overall, it's a little bit of a slower issue, but I definitely like where it's going, and it's always a fun read. So that is my number 5. Moving on to number 4. It's a little lower than usual, but I love the cover, and that is Jane Foster, Valkyrie. I absolutely love these Immortal Hulk things. So we get to see her as Valkyrie, Thor, and Jane. So that was cool. And honestly, the reason it's a little lower is because there were a couple of artists on this book. So, the regular artist, which is Cafu, only did like maybe 4 pages or so, did a few of the beginning pages and a few of the end. Mostly, I think it's that middle artist who was working, which is Ramon Perez. And that's mostly the action stuff, and it just wasn't as sleek as usual, especially some of the facial expressions felt a little squeezed in. So that's a little bit of a complaint, but still good action, and especially still good colors. And then I love the artwork when they went to, I guess, this version of heaven, whatever it was, the afterlife. Let me show you that. I thought that was really cool. It kind of reminds me of some of the Aftershock artwork. Let me see if it's the same guy. Yeah, it is actually the same guy, so that's why it reminded me of that. Jesus Alberto, I think, did some of our Aftershock titles. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed this, and I think there's some good emotions from Jane, and again, her still learning to be a Valkyrie and what this job entails, and I like that she really takes it full throttle. And I do like some of the mentions that happen here too. So she even mentions her son, who I think, from what I remember, had passed away with her ex-husband. So I like that mention because that's never mentioned in this series. So I'm interested to see now that she is this god of the afterlife, will that connective tissue play a part in a future storyline? And again, good action as always, and interesting cliffhanger that really bridges the gap between Earth and Asgard, which is, again, what I've been really loving about this series. What I loved about the Mighty Thor, and I think they do even better here, is that she is human, but she's also a god. So how do you balance that? So overall, I thought this was a fun issue. Not as good as issue 2 and 1, but still a good, solid issue. So gonna give this one 3.5 stars, and that is number 4. Moving on to number 3, which is Second Coming, issue 3. As you guys know, I've been loving this series. I do think this issue had a little bit of hiccups, especially with the devil and Jesus scene. I think they're trying to fit way too much into it. We have a really powerful scene where Jesus walks into this gay bar, and then you have, all these protesters in front of there, and Jesus is like, you're wrong. They like, Paul, who is Paul? So I enjoyed that, and I kind of wish there was more time to explore that, because obviously religion, sexuality is a very huge topic, so it would have been nice to kind of see Jesus's point of view a little bit more. And it was weird that he met the devil in there. I didn't quite like that choice. But overall, I did like a lot of the emotional beats here as Jesus kind of realizes what Earth has become and how they've taken his word out of context. And then going to the superhero where he realizes punching things is not always going to be the answer, as he deals with nostalgia and his grandmother who took care of him getting sick and having to deal with her having dementia. So how is he gonna deal with that? And we get to see Jesus by the end is captured, and people think he's crazy, and he's like, what's going on here? He sees the brightest side of humanity, but he's now seeing the darker sides of it. And we do get to see how Jesus' narrative and, again, Sunstar's narrative weave together here. Artwork is so good. I keep mentioning I love the darker palette for when we get to see Jesus, or like the old school Jesus stuff, and then how bright and super heroic the actual superhero story is. I really enjoy the artwork a lot here. But overall, I thought it was a solid issue. It, again, had slight hiccups that I feel like they could have done more with, but I still enjoy this book a lot. It's one of my favorites. So Second Coming, issue 3 gets 4 stars, and that is number 3. Moving on to number 2, which is Teen Titans, issue 34, and I was pleasantly surprised by this one. When the issue started, I'm like, okay, we get it. We're gonna, have another fight with the team, and DeJorn, I can never say her name right, but that character, I think it's Jeannie, her superhero name, she loses her ring, and it's this really interesting kind of mystery story and detective story where Damien's going after everybody, like, did you do it? Did you do it? And then by the end, crazy cliffhanger is that Roundhouse is controlling DeJorn by the end. And you're like, what? The guy you definitely wouldn't expect. Is he evil? What's going on? So I like all the drama going on in between. The artwork's still not my favorite. It's a little bit too bulky for me, but I enjoyed the story, and I think as the issue went on, I enjoyed it even more. So overall, I think this is a really good sleeper hit if you're sitting on Teen Titans, one of the better DC titles. Moving on to number 1, which is Miss Marvel, issue 7. So happy to have this in my top 5. I really didn't quite like the previous arc, but this went back to basics where we get to see Kamala, Zoe, and Nakia just take a day off. They're going on a road trip, and I love the narration as well. Really reminded me of G. Willow Wilson, of her saying, hey, you kind of need repetition and what that means, and then you see stuff that are kind of breaking her repetition with her dad being sick. So she's dealing with all of that, she's dealing with being a superhero, and her friends are like, let's get out of here. And then they have to deal with a really fun arc, which is locked down in Discord, which is Josh. So I love how personal it all gets by the end of the issue. How is Zoe and Nakia gonna deal with this? Because they're connected to this story as well. They're there. They also have shown their superheroics in the past, so I really enjoyed this one. I had a blast, and I hope all the issues for the future are like this and mix the supporting characters as much as they did here. And then the artwork was really good, cartoony, sleek. I love the emotions here. I believe it's the same artist who did Marvel Team Up, so I really enjoyed that as well. So if you're looking for more of the slice of life type story that you enjoy from Miss Marvel, I thought this was the best issue of the series so far. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. That is my number one. This is Comic Uno. Definitely go follow me on Twitter and my Facebook. Go check out my comics like Father Like Daughter and They Call Her the Dancer. And every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time is Frontline Live, where we discuss our favorite comics and comic book news. So be sure to check that as well. Thanks guys. Bye.